Perfect. Okay, so welcome. We've spent a little bit of time talking about the holidays, the the lights and the decorations and all sorts of things that happen along with the season and the differences in different countries. So I think it's a really good segue into what we'll be talking about today as we start off, which is going to be about inclusivity. So we'll be talking a little bit about that. But before we get there, I wanted to show everyone a couple of things. One is going to be Curator, where you can find the link to our exercise from yesterday. We'll talk about a little bit about the review that we had, that happy, sad face. And then we had a great question from one of our colleagues right at the end after people dropped off that I also wanted to address. And then we'll talk about the agenda for today and that kind of thing. So that's how we're going to get started off. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So as everyone has gone into Curator, you know exactly where we are. So you clicked on module 3 for today, which is managing from the middle. And what we want to do is go to this, so you know that this is where everything is. And whenever you want to go back to this, is you go to this leaderboards. That's how you get back to this. But in the pre-workshop information and resources, you're going to scroll all the way down to here to useful workshop links. And when you click on it, you're going to see where it says this Google part, right? And in this Google part, you can click on this and you will find two links. This link is for the last class, so don't worry about this one. This is where we were yesterday. You can go ahead and click on it. And you see it's the remote competencies. This is what we spoke about yesterday. It is filled in with what your colleagues had written yesterday. And if you want, you can go ahead and download it to your computer or save it to your Gmail if you have a Gmail. And you can then use this template with your team if you like. Okay, but just make sure you save it or put it to your, because if not, and everybody might still be in the same one, right? So you want to make sure you have your own copy of it. So you want to download a copy of it. So again, I'm going to show you where that was. So you go to useful workshop links, and this is in the pre-information workshop pre-information workshop resources. I think that's how it was called. And I will show you again right here. Okay. Now, also in this platform, Yuri, I noticed you commented on the Johari window. That is also a very cool thing to look at. So there are different resources in this curative platform. This is the leadership model that we talked about yesterday. So you can go into this and look a little bit more as well. All right, and so you can definitely look at all the different resources each day has. We won't always cover this. This is just extra content for you, for those who like saying that you like to have more information. So this is where you clicked on today, okay? And the Johari window, I believe, is right in the first one. Let me make sure. Where is that one?
It's in the first, you entered the pre, but it was in the first class, first module.
Every single one I went to, the only one I didn't go to, right? And the Johari window is very cool. It's very interesting thing where you ask questions. And it's a different approach to sort of learning. And we'll talk a little bit more about how people learn, and it's not necessarily all about formalized learning. So any questions on Curator or where to find information? No? Okay. So one of our colleagues yesterday was asking a little bit about the remote competencies that we did yesterday. And I wanted to address it because we're going to be talking about inclusivity. And one of the things that we can sometimes do is just we have biases that we don't always realize are there. And one of the questions that we had from one of our colleagues was, oh, I don't do any remote work. I work in a hospital. So we're always at work. And it was one thing that we had not really thought about when we had not really talked about, even in that context of some of the ideas, some of the things that we were talking about had the understanding that you might be have been involved in remote work at some point in your life, right? And so that was a bias, right? And we were able to talk a little bit about what that looked like. And I don't want to call this person out. So if you want to say something, you're welcome to say something. If not, don't feel like you have to. But that concept of, we think about, everybody sort of being on the same baseline. You've done some remote work, or you have had this experience. And when we started talking about sort of culture and communication, it's like, oh, what if that one person just says they're going to show up at a meeting and then they don't? And then there's no camera, they don't turn the camera on. And I said, exactly, that's some of the things that we were talking about yesterday. So I just wanted to bring that up to make sure that everybody was on the same page. And does this person want to say anything or not? No. Okay. So just as a wrap up from that, I want to say the other thing that I looked over everyone's Google slide, and one of the things that came up in the communication one was sort of that language sensitivity, inclusivity, cross-cultural communication. And I wanted to highlight that because, again, we don't know what we don't know, and sometimes we might be operating on the place of what people have all done remote work, and that might not be the case. So being mindful of your own biases when you're talking to people, your own abilities to make sure that what you're communicating makes sense cross-culturally. And then also what somebody was writing in the digital one was the limited connectivity, right? So that can be very difficult for people to always be joining um, in in that capacity. So, that you might have to, that person might be calling in, or that person might be not able to have their cameras on. And so being able to recognize that might not be a lack of engagement, that might be a lack of ability to connect. Any other thoughts on what we're saying? No, we'll launch into today's stuff. Okay. So as we started talking about today, we are going to just dive a little bit into inclusive management and how to avoid expressing that bias. And I am well aware that this could be a whole course. So let's be mindful that we're just going to touch the surface of it, because to give it its due, you would really want to spend a lot of time on it. But I want to make sure we don't miss that in our discussions. And that's why I want to make sure we spend some time on that today. Um, and then we're going to be thinking about influence versus authority. What is the difference, right? And how do you influence others? And how do you effectively communicate up and down, right? So meaning above you, your managers, how do you communicate below you? And what is that? It's different. It's different. And then understanding start talking about influence strategies. We might not get too far into that today, but we'll start thinking about currencies and the currencies we have and how that might help us in our influence. So that's how our day is going to go. Again, any questions, feedback, please put it in the chat. And the last wrap up that I want to do for the day is also to present to you the happy, sad face review that we had yesterday. There were some people that were putting some stuff in the chat. my chat was not up. So if you put stuff in the chat, you want me to put it in in any of the annotate, just let me know, hey, I put something in the chat, in case I don't see it, because sometimes I'm using my whole screen. So the overwhelming ideas here is that things are going okay, but we would like more time for breakouts and tasks, and that is the main challenge with any training is content versus breakout, right? And so some people feel like, I really want more content so I can get these concepts, but we can't do more content if we spend a lot of time in breakouts. So it's always the challenge in between of hi. So I'm doing my best to try to lengthen the breakout rooms for all of you. All right. So that at the moment of not losing out any of the content that we're presenting. All right. But trying to make sure that we do have that breakout. So here's where we're at. If there's any other feedback, thoughts on this, I'm happy to address it as we start moving along. But otherwise, it looks like things are starting to go well, and only our third day. So does that sound good? Yeah. Okay. So what we're going to be doing today, what we're looking at right now, is just this idea of inclusivity. And what does that mean? I mean, it's a buzzword that gets thrown around sometimes. And sometimes, we wonder, what does this cover? What does this mean when we say inclusivity? So I'd like to just open it up to the group as to what you think inclusivity means. What does this cover? So Micah, if you're talking, we don't hear you. Yuri promised himself to be silent, so he's not gonna he's not gonna catch you guys. So our two Yuri and Micah who speak first are not going to. So who else can speak about what inclusivity means? And now I'm looking at Badia, Olga, Lovi, Emma, Christoph. What do you think? What does it mean? You can put it in the chat too. I know this is a hard one.
Well, I can start.
Oh, sure. Oh, Christoph, if you were saying something, we can't hear you. No, we still can't hear you.
Hello.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay, yeah. Maybe shortly I can say that inclusivity is just, in the management domain, it's to make sure that everyone feels understand his role or feels that he's considered in what you are doing. Yeah.
That's a great one. That's a great explanation. Everyone's considered, everyone feels that they are being included. Olga, were you going to say something of the same?
I would like to say that for my understanding, inclusivity, it's the environment where everyone are accepted, any gender, any sexual orientation, whoever you like to be. The main thing is about your knowledge, experience, etc., but everyone are welcome.
Wonderful. Okay, well, I think that includes a lot. Yes, and Micah, did you want to say something more to them?
Well, for me, I was thinking that maybe inclusive management means that maybe when everyone knows his or her role, and we try to get involved in helping out with the work that has been delegated to us.
Mm-hmm. 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 Good. So that, you know, and all the roles are, the roles are sort of in the same vein, right? So that all different people are included and their roles. And Emma saying, asking questions, keeping an open mind, finding consensus. Good. And I know, Micah, you keep on trying to say something. If you can't, that's fine. We have another question, which is then, if that's, you know, inclusivity, then what is unconscious bias? And I started talking about that as we started.
Same people talk, or maybe Yuri wants to say something.
Yuri's
I
been
can
holding
jump
on
in.
really tightly, trying not to say anything. Please do.
No, but I like unconscious bias is my favorite in a way that first of all, it comes because we all come from different backgrounds with different experiences, and we don't know how much society affects us. How do we communicate with people? And I do believe this is unconscious bias that comes, that might develop even a stigma or some actions among you, that like, how do you deal with different kind of people? And this unconscious bias might come from actions of the person that you've just met, of some how he, she, they act, perform some activities, or it just might come from their background. And here we would speak about already discrimination, that like you just don't accept some people for certain reasons, in my opinion.
No, I think that that's great. I think that was really comprehensive because, you know, you kind of wonder, why is this still such a problem in the 21st century? And because we're all still dealing with inherited stereotypes and biases. And it's just that it could be a passing comment that sticks in our mind, you know, but in general, as kids, we grow up needing labeling to help us understand and digest the world, right? And then we grow up, it's important for that child to deal with the world, to not feel overwhelmed by these labels. All right. But then it's how the media and then even our own nurturing creates those definitions and continues these definitions for us. And then that continues through our lives, that then creates these biases that we don't even realize exist sometimes. So when we start thinking about what that is, we recognize it's not in our conscious, right? It's not that we're mindful or aware. Again, I already had one, was that I recognized thinking that everyone has somewhat worked in a remote environment, or, you know, have had some experience about it. And that's a bias, right? Because I started doing these trainings, you know, I don't know, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that I started doing my first training online. So I have a bias already of like, well, you know, we've all been on camera at some point or another, and that's not true. So thinking about that and recognizing that that's a bias. So Micah's saying inclusivity, such as opportunity, it's demanding of ourselves to ask, who haven't I heard from? Whose voice is missing? Yes, and you see me doing this here, like, I haven't heard from this person. If you're okay, put it in the chat, right? It's easier to do it in a smaller group, but when your group gets bigger, your team gets bigger, it gets harder and harder sometimes. And as for bias, what exactly am I or is my team afraid of, that if a voice comes into the mix? It might be doing something differently. It might be doing something a way that you've never thought of before, right? And sometimes if people have gotten very structured in their way of being, that they don't think about, maybe it's not even they don't think about it, it's that it's hard to change, right? It's hard to change these things, because honestly, the opposite of being an inclusive manager is being dismissive, right? So thinking about it in that context, how do you think this affects our organizations and our work? You just said one right there was, you know, that we might do something differently, and that might be better for us. what is dismissive meaning in this sense? Meaning you're by not including others, you're dismissing, meaning like you're not, try not to use the word including and dismissive. You're not bringing those people out. You're kind of, ignoring is kind of too strong of a word, but you're not looking to them for insight, information, background, whatever. You're just sort of like, well, you can just get along with everyone else. You can just do it our way. I'm not going to hear your voice. Thank you, Micah. Also could be you're pushing them their voices, perspectives out. There we go. I got to the voice eventually part. But yeah, what does this mean? How do you think that this is going to affect our organizations and our work? We miss out on information, maybe.
Yeah, I think here it ends up stifling ideas, right? It ends up stifling people. And so if you don't feel like you're being heard, if an idea or something that you're bringing to the table is not even considered, right, by your teammates, you're less likely to bring a new idea to the table next time. And that's just really disempowering for people, right? So then it'll probably lead to like a little bit of a negative cycle of that continuing to happen, and probably ultimately people leaving an organization, right, if they feel like they're not being heard. I think it also really hurts the organization itself, because you're not getting new ideas, you're not taking into consideration new perspectives. And I think that's really how we like learn and grow, learn from each other and grow, as more broadly.
Well said, Emma. Very well said. Yes, exactly. And thinking, what we said yesterday about ultimately people just want to feel seen and heard, right? And that was part of that framework, the situational leadership framework. So you're looking at the person, you're looking at the task, right? Because it might be that somebody might need a little more support on a task, but if we act like that overall the person needs help for everything, then we're not looking at it from a perspective of really seeing and hearing them. Do others want to add on to what Emma just said? She said it quite eloquently. Okay, so what I'm going to do is we're going to go into small groups, and I'm going to actually just do it since we have sort of smaller amount of participants. We're going to do half, right? So one group is going to be on one side, the other group is going to be on the other side. And we're going to ask these two questions. As a manager and a leader of power, where do you have the opportunity to include or exclude, right? So maybe in hiring, in meetings, and then how can you and your team take steps to be more aware of when you're expressing bias and check on each other? Christine, I said 8 minutes. I know I made that even more than the 7 minutes allotted, but I'm actually going to give them 10 minutes. So I really want you to be able to sit in your groups and talk to each other about this, because I think this is a very big and an important topic, and I want to give it its due. If you see us, it's okay that we might not cover everything today, but we will get to everything, I promise. I just want to give you time to talk a little bit more about this, and I know you wanted more breakout time. So we're going to do 10 minutes. So that's going to be 9 minutes with a minute countdown, right? So that you know when you're about to come back in. And all I'm going to ask you to do is share your key highlights, right? So that we have enough time. But I think that this is a really important subject. So we're going to get 10 minutes. Where do you have the opportunity to include or exclude? And how can you and your team make steps to be more aware of when you're expressing bias? And have a nice discussion, but try to come up with just your key points. Appoint a spokesperson and just come up with your key points so we can share them with the group. Okay. Any questions? Okay, we'll see you in 10 minutes. Welcome back. I hope that was enough time for everyone to kind of talk a little bit about that and start thinking about ooh, as a position of power, right? And thinking about what do you have, where do you have those opportunities? So we had two groups. Can either one spokesperson from either group kind of just give us the key highlights?
I was the note taker from our group, so I can give a few highlights from our team. Christoph and Yuri were in my group. So we spent most of the time talking about the first question, and we had just a minute or two to get to the second question. But I think we identified a lot of different situations where you might have an opportunity to include or exclude. We talked about hiring processes and priorities in terms of who gets invited to meetings and then participates in those meetings. I think how information is shared and who is included in the kind of transparency of information. And then we talked a bit about professional development and promotion within organizations, especially of groups who might be, minority groups or women, LGBTQI groups who might be more traditionally excluded, right? And looking to bring them in might be more, that's kind of the question of equity, right? Versus kind of bringing them in a bit more intentionally than you might with other groups. And then opportunities for exclusion, we talked about, Yuri brought up specifically like opportunities for business trips or conferences or things like that. It's more often that people are excluded from those opportunities, right, than included. So just thinking about how at different levels or within the structures, how that might look a little bit differently. And then taking steps to be aware of biases and then to check biases. We didn't have as much time to talk about this, but brought up the importance of having policies in place, if it's like sexual harassment or gender policies that directly take these issues on, and kind of provide some guidelines for how to address these, that's more formalized. But then we are also talking about just like getting to know people and recognizing their different backgrounds and experiences, and using that as kind of a way to kind of address some of those biases and create a space where people are more comfortable, speaking up or raising issues that they may face.
Those are great. Those are great. And you made me think of something that I will say in a moment and after the other group goes, but you made me think of something. Our second group, first of all, but thank you. That was a really, really good rundown of a lot of different things you can consider. And I think that those are all things that, you might have the opportunity as a manager to sort of influence and see how you might be able to incorporate some of these things. Group 2, did you have more to add on that? Did they cover a lot of the same things you covered?
I can be a representative from our group. Yeah, do you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah. In our group, I would say that we rather discuss the second question, the steps that we either already took within our organizations, or we just shared the ideas, what can be done to involve other people and not to exclude people, but rather include. And as Micah said, that for example, in their organization, they try to avoid using abbreviations and some slang words, which means that everybody are on the same page and they are involved in all the processes and they understand what everybody are talking about. Mm-hmm. From my side, I shared also experience, like recently, ECOM had a meeting in Istanbul and we have new team members, and part of the team was talking with every abbreviations and the other team was just sitting and looking at them with the big rounded eyes without having any idea what they were talking about. So we also agreed like excluding anything that everybody don't understand, or just if you are not sure about the wording, if you're not sure about the terminology, just talk about it. Don't be afraid of, everybody wants to be heard, and talk to people and they will explain to you everything. Another thing is about organizing online training for team members. For instance, like Yuri is an expert in one field, and we have experts, our team members who knows much more about other things in human rights area. And it's good to exchange the knowledge and maybe different kind of approaches and sharing it within the within the team, when everybody can work on the same topic, but maybe from different point of views. So it's also can be useful like a step when you want others to know more about your topics. And one more thing that we talk through, it's about, let's say if you know that one of your team members failed, for instance, and you don't want to involve this person anymore to the task, then maybe just try one more time and give a new task very different from his or her area of expertise, to have this kind of chance and opportunity to show that maybe the failure was just a matter of, I don't know, coincidence, and just see if it goes better. Yeah, that's it.
I love that. I love all of those, but that last one, yes. I think, again, when we come back to that trust versus respect and benevolence, right, we'll be talking about that. The idea of how to build trust is to create maybe tasks that are that are a little more simple, that are a little smaller, to then build the trust with each other, so that you might, that way you can see more other different parts of a person and not just sort of one area. So I really like that. And yes, the acronyms, the shortened words, I spent 11 years at the Red Cross, and there are so many acronyms in that by the time I was sort of towards my end, I literally had to stop every single time to re-say the words that we had these acronyms from. So it's something that also for people to say, could, as you said, could you spell that out? Let me understand. Because it might be so ingrained in a person that they don't even realize they're doing it. Right. So I like how you have also like, how can you make more synergies? And the one thing that I was remembering when you were speaking, Emma, and again, and with Olga, and I'm glad you guys both, this team did both the first question and the second question. So you definitely got a lot in there. So I'm hoping you can take some of this away, and even me remembering to slow down my voice. One thing that I want to share here that might be helpful to you is this is a totally free test that is done by Harvard that you can go on, and it will give you, it's an unconscious bias test, right? So you can, go in, so you could say, I wish to proceed, and they'll give you these tests. So presidents, disability, Native American, gender, career, weapons, transgender. These are all different tests that are tests that you can take to measure an unconscious bias you have. Now, I am not affiliated with Harvard. Humentum has not, this is not recommended by Humentum. This is just something that I know that when I was doing some diversity, equity, inclusion work at a renewable organization that I was with, I used these tests. So people were able to discover their own unconscious biases, because one of the problems with unconscious bias is if it's not conscious, you're not completely aware of it. And it's unfortunate sometimes the way to find out about your unconscious biases is that somebody has to tell you. Right. So this will give you an opportunity, and I'll pop this actually in the chat as well. Again, not any affiliation, but if it's something that maybe you want to take, or that you want to see for yourself, or you feel like working with your team, it's something that's out there that exists. And I think that they have it as also so they can test people who's doing these. What are people more ageist? Are people not as aware? The skin tones, all these different things that are there. So that's kind of the section on inclusivity and unconscious bias. But the point of us also talking about this now is that being aware and being mindful of these things, that as you start going through this course, you'll start noticing that the tools and the tips and the frameworks, all these things that we're giving you, helps kind of protect, not protect, but helps you minimize that, because they're frameworks that you can use with everyone, right? And if you consider everyone as an individual, these are going to help, again, override some of these biases. So as we said, that situational leadership, no one style fits every person, but are you basing your style on a bias? You know, so you want to keep this in mind as you're going through the next few days, thinking, oh, my style is I like to do a lot of the texting, or I want everybody to be on camera, or so understanding the communication styles of the people you're around also will help getting the most out of people, because that's what you would like to do. Okay. So as we kind of go into this managing from the middle part, you know, people's perceptions of you are not just based on your actions, but they're based on the role you play in any given relationship. And like it or not, every relationship has a power dynamic, right? And that influences how messages are received, because communication is hard, right? And it's not just about delivering a message, it's about how you receive the message. We miscommunicate in the best of times. And then you lay on power dynamics, right? Remote working, cultural differences. I mean, the list goes on. No wonder our messages can get distorted. So, as we're thinking about this power dynamic, and that's why it's important as we're talking about managing from the middle, those who have less of a power, those who have less power are more able to take on the perspective of others. Right? People who have less power can take on more perspective of others. Why? Because they need to do it often, right? Those who are in more power can take on less of the perspective of others, is because they don't need to do it as often, right? So Bree said, the more powerful you feel, the worse you are at taking other people's perspectives. The least powerful you feel, the better you are at seeing the world from other people's points of view, because you need to. So power and status can actually distort worldviews, right? And of course, this translates to communication. Now, I'll put in a chat in a moment a couple of articles that reference this. This is by a person named Daniel Pink. Right? And so you can read more about this. We're not going to get into that theory, right? Because we could have a whole conversation on power dynamics. But what we're trying to do is talk about the idea of how you communicate to others and the challenges sometimes. So here's a couple of just YouTube and an article that you can read more on power dynamics. What I'm trying to get at here is not about whether or not that's true, but more about how people communicate and what can that look like sometimes. So let me share my screen. I know these are very old school things now that we have so much better communication tools these days. But if you think about this, when you're a manager, when that manager hat is on, everything you say has greater weight, right? So it's like a megaphone. You say something, if you're a manager, if you go up to the CEO, whatever that CEO says, everyone's listening, right? And this could also not even just be the formal authority. It could be like headquarters staff, right? Headquarters to the field. Everything that headquarters is saying is having this megaphone. All right. And then as an employee, you tend to have this gramophone, right? So this thing over here, that's what it's called. It's called a gramophone. All right. And you have, you're listening. You're listening to everything people are saying. You have this cone on your ear and it magnifies the message. right? Again, we're hearing more of what our headquarters staff say, or our donors say, you know, we're hearing more of that. All right. So if you think about this, the concept of that power dynamic, we had a CEO that was getting frustrated that we were turning away projects and doing things. And so what happened was she was like, you know what, we're the yes team. We want to be the yes team. Well, what happened? There was such a confusion about priorities. You know, everybody kept on saying, yes, yes, we'll do this. Yes, we'll do this. And there was such a waste of time. There was uncertainty. And the intention of that CEO was more just like, let's keep an open mind, right? Let's not just immediately say no to things. If she had been more intentional about how she said that, there wouldn't have been such a waste of resources. Right. The same thing goes to the staff, right? We had one staff member. She got a call from HR, and they said that they needed to talk to her and to come down to the office. Well, that employee just she goes to by the time she got to the HR office, she was so worried she was going to get fired because HR was calling her. She needed to go to their office. What did they need to know about? What was wrong? By the time she got there, she's in tears. She's going to get fired. And there was a problem with the payroll, and she was actually going to get more on her paycheck, but they didn't want to discuss her paycheck on the phone. So they needed her to come down to the office. Right? Simple phone call. The HR person said, hey, listen, we need to just discuss, there's a little blip with your paycheck. We're going to fix it, but you know, can you come to talk to us about it? Or however she might have said it, with the intention of, we need to discuss something, right? So these are pretty simple examples in the fact that our message, without really even meaning anything like that, can be distorted. Because the thing is, we judge ourselves and our actions, right, by our intent, and others judge us by our impact. We judge ourselves and our actions by our intent, and others judge us by our impact. So again, if that CEO had said something to my intention is that we become a more agile team. My intention is to call you and let you know we have just an accounting issue or a payroll or whatever it is, something very meaningful for the person so that they don't have this impact. So I did a lot of talking right now, and I want to give you an opportunity to think about when your messages have been distorted, right? Because it's happened to all of us. We've all done something totally not meaning to do it, but have. And this is our moment to let it go. So we're going to go in groups, and we're going to have you, it's going to be a group of three, and then one group of two. Wait, 2, 4, 6. Yeah, one group of 3 and 2 groups of 2. And you will talk about when your message has been distorted. And you can talk about this concept as well, right? I'm going to give you 6 minutes to go ahead and just have a little bit of a chat about message distortion. So talk about a time you've had it distorted, or you had distorted someone else's message. And if you want to talk about this kind of power dynamic we're talking about. Okay, 6 minutes. Any questions? And again, raise your hand if I'm going too fast. Yes, Christoph.
Yeah, just to make sure, is the message destroyed intentionally or unconsciously?
I'll let you decide. Whatever you want to share. So it could be an intentional distortion, or it could not be. It's up to you.
Good, thank you.
No problem. And as I said, raise your hand if I'm going too fast. I sometimes get excited and I talk fast. All right. Have you go off into your groups, and we'll see you in 6 minutes. Hello, welcome back. I am seeing smiles on people's faces. So that means that sounded like a good activity if there are smiles. Lovey, I've been loving seeing the nightfall behind you. It is very beautiful scenery you've got going. It's a very beautiful sunset. I've been watching it.
Thank you.
Wow,
Isn't that gorgeous?
it really is. Although it looks like a storm's coming in. I'd look at that sky, Lisa. Doesn't that look like a Washington, D.C. storm coming in on a spring day?
Yes, I can see that. I can see that. If it weren't for the fact that I've been watching
Yeah.
the sunset. So Lovey, do you mind talking about what you talked about in your group, or do you not want to share right at the moment? Oh, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. In our group, we shared, someone gave us an experience like when he gets some messages that may be abusive or offensive, they wouldn't like to take them into their heads because already there is this other disturbing message. So they feel like they're a little bit distorting and they get biased attitude towards the message. So those ones are always kept aside. Then we again shared an experience about one who got a message, I need you for a meeting. There's nothing like, what about the meeting? What was the agenda? So already that was a message that was a little bit disturbing, and she got a bias. She was already biased about the meeting, which really wasn't really good, and it was a bit distorting on her side. Then there's a sharing of an event whereby the card inviting people for a wedding reception was supposed read 2 p.m. and the wedding started at 6 p.m. Already the message was already distorted. People came in before, and I think they waited for a longer time. Yes, maybe if someone is willing to share the last one, because all of us talked, but I've forgotten the third one, the fourth one. Olga, can you help? Oh, I've summarized
I think
everything.
you involved everything, no?
All right.
Yuri.
Thank you.
Yeah, because I think everything was talked through. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that sounded very comprehensive, Lovey, and thank you. And they're all very different situations, which was nice to hear about. The last one, sometimes that might be cultural, right? So that might be like, well, if we have the invited to, you should know it's at 6, right? Or no, it should really be the time that it's supposed to be, right? And so recognizing that that's some people might take that as very offensive. How dare you, like, waste my time? So I hear you on that one. And then the first one, none of us should be getting abusive messages. Right. And so how do you best address this? Right. In saying that, when you do X, it makes me feel whatever it is, right? Not respected, or that it makes me feel that uncomfortable. So being able to also communicate if something is offensive. And also now I'm forgetting the middle one. Oh, I need you for a meeting. Yeah. I think many of us have all had bosses like that, that just won't exactly tell you what's going on because they're moving too fast and they just expect you to be there. And that's not happened to everyone, but it's certainly been an experience of mine. And again, how do you communicate back? How do you say, well, it'd be helpful for me to know what this meeting's about so I can plan accordingly. So Lovi and then Micah's talking about also on how we read an email, right? If we read an email with a stern voice in mind, then really we might get a stern idea and message in our head, right? So even if it's no drama or concern, so some of these things can be cultural, right? And some of these things are not. So how do you decide, and how do you also respond? So you see, there's so many different ways to read things, right? Especially when culture comes in, especially when those kind of things come in. You know, I know, and you know, I'm half Egyptian, I'm half Puerto Rican. So I know if something on one of my family reads a card at this time, it's really not going to start at this time, even though the best of intention is to always start at this time. Right? So again, how you decide these different things. Does anyone want to add to this? Oh, I see you laughing there.
Because I'm half Georgian, half Ukrainian, and my Georgian blood, it really brings me always in trouble. I'm always late for many things. I mean, when it comes to meeting, and even my friends, they know if I said I'll be in 15 minutes, it never happens.
So that resonated with you. And then sometimes, because we come from a culture, we might go all the way the opposite direction, trying to course correct. So you know, we all are human. And so hopefully some of us, and when we're reading things, when it's like, always try to assume the best of intent, right? Because if we come from that place, if we come from the best, that we're assuming the best intentions, we'll even if it just helps us in the process, right? But again, there's certain lines and certain boundaries that you need to make sure that if it becomes to a place of abusiveness, or if it comes to a place of that it's discussed. Okay. And so one of the ways to do that is to have conversations before, you know, beforehand. So one of the things that I asked you to do yesterday was to look at for some homework on workbook page 17. Now, I am totally understanding that if that did not happen, but I, you know, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen of what it was that I was asking you to look at. And that's this, understanding each other. Did anyone have a chance to look at this at all?
Looked, but did not complete.
Did not have to complete it.
Yeah.
Okay. I saw you and Yuri said yes. I'm going to venture to guess I know the answer to this, but if you were able to complete it, if you were able to sit down, do you think you would know the answer to every single one of these questions for you and your boss?
When I jump in, Lisa, can't be silent. When I was doing this was my particular answer, that like, it's my assumption. How do I see my boss? How he works, what he expects. And then like, we never had it, like, if I didn't ask this question to him, I don't know, like the question, for example, what expectation does your manager have of you? I can just assume, but I have no really idea what his expectation of me. So this is the story, that it's just like, how do I operate? How do I see my manager, my expectation on him? And then there is some reality that I didn't have a chance to find out.
So, so Micah's nodding her head. And so I'm going to say, for every time I've given this course, the answer usually is no. No, I can't answer all the questions for both my boss and myself. Now, I'm going to go through this kind of quickly, all right? But what I want to say about this is how you can get on the same page, right? So when you're communicating, it's important to understand where your boss is coming from, so it will influence how you communicate with them. If you don't know your boss's expectations of you, you think you do, but maybe you're not on the same page, this is where you can lead to miscommunication. So here's some just background information on this. So this first question's objectives and goals, you know, there's organizational objectives, and then there's personal objectives. They might have a personal objective of their own they want, right? They might have these stressors and pressures that you may not be aware of. They may be working on the organizational strategy. They may be dealing with problems with their boss or problems with their peers. So what are the blind spots? Well, you might know your boss's blind spots, but they might not know, and vice versa. All right. Are they a really detailed orientated person, or are they super big strategy? Right. That expectations, right, as you were just saying, that might be task specific, deadlines, supports. What are some of those expectations, right? And what are the manager's expectations have, right? They might be expected to do a budget at a certain time of the year that you don't even know about. So you could be asking them questions and sort of doing all sorts of stuff where they're really trying to focus on something and you're not aware of it. And then what might come across as them being kind of gruff might be just because they're also working in the middle of something and you're not aware of it. So what kind of work style does your manager have? Is it formal? Is it informal? All right. I had a boss that she always wanted me to drop by her office. She always wanted me to stop by. She didn't want me to put stuff in an email because she would never read her email. Right. And she just wanted me to pop by all the time. And that's because she liked the distractions. And I had another boss who was the exact opposite of that. Do not stop by her office. That would be the wrong thing to do. All right. Send her an email, set up a time, have an agenda. That's what needs to happen. And don't ask her questions other than that. Those were two extremes. I worked well with both of them because I knew their communication styles. That worked well for me. At least I knew, right? Me bugging someone by popping in their office all the time, you know, if that wasn't going to get me what I was looking for, right? And like, are they a listener? Are they like more of a verbal communicator? Right? Are they more of a hands-off person? Just only bother me when there's when you need to. Right. So these are all yes, thank you, Yuri, where it's like our boss said, here's the times you can come and I am available to you. Otherwise, if it's not an emergency, it's not an emergency. Right. I've had some bosses where they have like a running like a Google sheet where it's like any questions would just go on the sheet and then they could come in and answer the questions when they had time. Right. Everyone has a different communication style. So if you don't know the answers to these questions, what do you think you can do?
Communicate with the boss.
Yes. Micah, is that what you're going to say?
I was saying, I was actually thinking more how helpful it would be to do this exercise with my team. Because I have a pretty good handle on him. We've worked together many years. But, my team has only worked, depending on who it is, a few years, few months, few weeks. So that could be interesting.
Yes. So this is what this is for. This is what this course is for. Take this worksheet, bring it to your team, bring it to your supervisor. If there are questions on there you want to know answers to, put in other questions. This is a perfect opportunity to say, hey, I went to this management skills course and I'd like to try something new. Because let's ask. So that way you can cut off the miscommunication before it happens. Because you want to develop and manage the relationship in whatever way you can, because trust and confidence is essential to the relationship. We keep on talking about trust and confidence. And so understanding yourself and your boss can go a long way to proving that you're dependable and preventing misunderstanding. Right? So that is so essential to the relationship. And being aware that both your strengths and weaknesses will give you an idea of how you can move forward to benefit you both. Right? So sometimes you might realize, you might be so great at Excel and spreadsheets and, putting up diagrams and reports and, slide decks and all that stuff. And that might not be your boss's strength. So could you lend a hand in that, saying, hey, can I help with this? Right? Can I do this? Can I take this off your plate? That will go a long way. right? Maybe it's the opposite, right? Or you know that somebody's not great at public speaking. So we're going to start thinking about all these things, all right, as currencies. What are the things that you're good at? What are some of the skills you have? We're going to talk about this in just in a few more minutes, but being respectful also, being respectful of people's time. You know, I'm a talker. I like to talk, right? I like to process out loud. That drives some people crazy. I know this. And so I try to keep it to a minimum. If I recognize that that's not what somebody wants to hear, I say, okay, then what are the top things I need to know? You know, and then I'll come back to it, right? Or if you like to process too, then it's like, wee, right? How do we limit the time? Let's not go over processing everything, right? And being respectful, right? Being respectful of the fact that somebody might be an introvert versus an extrovert. Right? So being understanding of each other's time, and don't waste time if you can help it, right? And building trust by being trustworthy, right? Practice being dependable. Don't overpromise. I'm one of those under promise, over deliver people. All right. I like being that way. If I say I'm going to see 10 people, I'll see 14, but I'm only committing to 10. That's the way I operate, so that people know that they can always trust to do what I say I'm going to do. Right. And if I can give them extra, I will. And just remember to speak the language of power, or for those speak the language of power for those you seek to influence. And the language of power is being able to understand people, being able to make people feel seen, being heard, right? You know, you want to make sure that people feel that you understand them, and that is a power. Feeling that you really do care about them, that you really do understand them, that you do really want to be there and do the right thing is huge, right? If you've ever been in any sort of recruitment process, you realize how hard it is to find people that can do all these things, right? So let's be mindful of that. These things can and be used for powers of good. All right, because as I'm going to start talking about something called an influence strategy, all right, we're not going to get to it today, but I want to stress the importance of using your powers for good, not evil, especially when you know how to influence people. Okay, I'm going to pause if there's any questions right now. And I'm still going slow enough. Yeah. Olga.
Maybe you can give a recommendation based on your experience. How is better, for instance, for me to come with this form, with this table to the manager? I mean, I understand that it's just about communication and asking to complete the table, but maybe there is some other way how to convince to complete it.
Well, you can set up a one-on-one, right? So you can ask for a meeting. You could give it before the meeting, and then you can say, can we talk about this together, right, in that meeting, right? So you're not forcing them to go complete this, but you can say, listen, I filled this, or you could say, I filled this out. Is this correct? Can we talk about if I might have missed something, right? However best you know your boss, right? So my guess would be, hey, I had this great management skills training. We had this. I filled this out in the course. I'm going to send it to you. Can we chat about that together to see if I was on track? Right. Make it as low, like you're not forcing them to do anything, but you want them to be able to have a conversation because you want to do well, right? You want to frame it in the positive, that this is a tool to help advance the conversations. Others have thoughts on that? All right, we're going to
just say, Oh, I would just say it helps when we have whole team, which we haven't done in many years here, kind of personality studies. Like, so we've done the Enneagram and Myers-Briggs and some of these others, because then you have a facilitator and you have someone right there to just sort of expose how everybody operates. And there are always a lot of nodding heads and self-reflection. And that's also like a super interesting environment, because it's not just you and the manager, but it's sort of like everybody, and helps you kind of identify not just how your own team operates, but how the teams that you are digging into and leaning on might operate.
Yeah, and there's something else that we'll do, you know, that's a team one there, and I can give you guys give this group a few different examples of different things that you can do like that as well. And there's also one that's going to be this kind of a heart tree star framework, which is like, what's important to you? How do you want to grow? How do you want to be rewarded? It could also be weaved into that conversation. So when we get there, we'll do that as well. So we're going to do one thing really quickly. It's a game, right? And we're going to come to it. We're going to have 2 minutes, right? Half groups again. And I want you to come up with currencies. Now, I said this as a term, as in like, oh, maybe you're good at Excel. Maybe you know a lot of languages. Maybe you're a really good networker. Maybe you're versed in like Photoshop, right? I just gave you a bunch. Those could all be considered currencies. And what currencies mean is like something you can exchange like money. It's value. What are value? Right? So what you're going to do is you're going to go into 2 groups, write down as many currencies as you can, right? And then we'll come back and we'll close out the course with seeing how many currencies, which group wins. Right. So again, we'll go into 2 groups, come up with as many currencies. So ideas, what are things that are currencies to you, that are skills, abilities, things like that. And then we'll come back and we'll see how many you had. Okay. Any questions? All right. 2 minutes. We'll see you at that time, and we'll look at how many you guys had.
I know what you mean now, Futsal.
Okay.
I think I know exactly what you mean.
Oh, too short.
It was intentionally short. It was,
very short.
A
Too
game.
short.
Group 1, how many did you have?
But who is group 1?
Your group. How many did you have?
3, 4, 5. I counted 6. Did you guys have 6?
I didn't
Yuri, I
count.
don't hear you. I was taking little notes. Do you want to hear them real fast?
Yes.
Yeah, we said extra time off, access to like training, travel, like a chance to go see something in person or to visit another office, development, attending conferences, maybe a special lunch out, and then finding, this was the one that came right at the end that we were discussing as we came in, which is like actually one of our best currencies is finding the solution for people. So when they are actually coming to you with something, actually solving the problem. Did I catch that right, Crystal?
Okay.
I probably spoke very quickly, but
that's all right. That's all right.
Conclusions.
We're right at the end of the course, or the session for today. The other group, how many did you have?
We had 11, but I also think we interpreted the question slightly differently. So I don't know. We were just talking more about like our skills or talents or things that we feel like we bring to an organization.
No, that's it too. These are all currencies. So if you, we will look at these a little bit closer tomorrow. What are these currencies that everyone came up with? For Emma's team, you win the bragging rights. Yay. We will go back. And so as we start talking about how to influence others, you'll see how these currencies can be used. So it was just an idea of how quickly can you start thinking of all the different currencies you may not even realize you hold yourself. Okay. So with that, thank you so much for joining today. As we said, start and end on time. Christine is writing that the sessions are recorded. So if you want to go back, or if you know one of your colleagues wasn't able to make it today, please have them refer to the recording. I will be on for a couple minutes if anyone has any additional questions. The room will be open 5 minutes beforehand if there are any questions as well. If not, take care. Have a wonderful rest of your day and see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you, Lisa. Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.